There we go. Hi, everybody. Well, these are the books from June. So we'll say June because it's July right now. I know I'm posting this before August. So here we go. We're going to talk about the books that I read in June. It looks like there are 11 of them. And let's run some numbers about what genres. Memoir. I guess I can show you them. Or should I not? Memoir. Another nonfiction. This one's history. This is the nonfiction one that just fell. Like religious theology. Fiction, straight up. Fiction, crooked and not successful. Fiction, romance. Right now we're at 3 and 3. Fiction, fantasy. Nonfiction, general. Yeah. Another fantasy, middle grade, and then another fiction. So it looks like 3, 4 to 7. First up is Frighten the Horses by Oliver Radcliffe. This is a memoir, and I heard about it from Roxane Gay. I didn't know much about it. We picked it for book club for Pride Month in June, and the author is a transgender man. So the first thing that I kind of assumed, because it is published by Roxane Gay's imprint, is that the writing was going to be excellent, and it was. So that was incredible. This is actually the first Roxane Gay imprint book that I've read, and it did not disappoint. I really admire writing that leaves out everything it possibly can in the service of the book and of telling you only the story that it's trying to tell you. And I think with everything that's hard, memoir especially, that can be really tricky. So this book was also really weirdly propulsive. Like, I wanted to read it in one sitting, and when I wasn't reading it, I wanted to get back to it and keep reading it, which is not something that I think comes very easily to memoir necessarily, except when it's written really well. So Crying in H Mart was one of those for me. It was so, I mean, I stayed up till 3 a.m. reading that one night, and I wasn't even gonna be able to finish it. I just couldn't put it down. So I learned a lot from this memoir, the way that you learn from someone who is being incredibly honest about something incredibly difficult. And I thought that was super valuable. I almost always do. Like, to me, that's empathy, right? Like, reading about things that you don't experience gives you the ability to become empathetic as a person. I got on Writing Well when I was up because the sentence in this says, I can probably quote it from memory, but writing and like open to it. Writing improves in direct ratio to the number of things we can keep out of it that shouldn't be there. The first 3 chapters of this book will change your writing. I happened to read it. I'm so sorry. The first 3 chapters in this will change your life. I said writing, but I meant life, because I really believe that. There's a chapter on simplicity and a chapter on clutter, and they are so brief and strong. And before I work with any writers, I always have them read those 2 chapters, because they say something that no other book on writing has said that well, that I found. And we're not here to talk about that book. Maybe if we do a video of like all my favorite books, we'll come to that one. But next up, it has been a long time coming, Say Nothing by Patrick Radden Keefe. This book is hyped by everyone you've ever heard of and their families. It came out in 2019, and it recently made the best books of the 21st century list. I also saw, it was either Kaveh Akbar or I think it was Hanif Abdur-Raqib talking about Patrick Radden Keefe as just kind of like a legend and the talent in this book. So I had really high expectations going into it. The one thing that tempered that was Teddy had said it was really nuts, and that was kind of her takeaway. And I thought, no, like everybody else is obsessed with this. I'm so interested, because she's also one of the smartest readers of dense things that I know. So for her to say that, I was curious, and I read it. It is over 400 pages. If you don't know, it's about the Troubles in Northern Ireland. And if you, like me, did not know, they happened in like the 70s, the 1970s. I probably would have been completely wrong in the century. Definitely would have had the wrong decade. So interestingly, I read Prophet Song earlier this year, and I didn't like it. After I read Say Nothing, which is real history, Prophet Song is like a doomsday, imaginary, the world is falling apart book. I got Prophet Song so much more after reading like, oh, car bombs and barricades and hospital like all of these things have happened in your country in recent memory. So when the author of Prophet Song, Paul Lynch, was putting those, sorry, these sleeves are so big, into the imaginary future, it was a lot less imaginative than I thought it was. Anyway, he doesn't set out in this book to walk you through the history of the Troubles from the first day to the last. He is trying to solve one specific murder, the murder of Jean McConville, and that is something you'll have to read to see what happens with. I'm trying so hard not to spoil. The research that went into this book was massive. The writer's ability to not make you feel like you're standing under Niagara Falls was also completely successful. So I just finished a book, oh, it's right here, where that was not the case. And sometimes that happens, right? Carrie Greenidge did a massive amount of research for this book, and that's all you taste when you're reading it. It was a really unpleasant reading experience. This book was to the sentence, to the paragraph, and then to the chapter and the structure completely readable. And that's so hard to do, especially when you've just been sitting with all of the information and the ideas for so long, and especially when you love them so much and like you care so much about the work that you've done and the things that you've learned, and sometimes that can get in the way of people's ability to communicate it. That did not happen here, which is incredible. It was dense. I thought it was dense. And I love a really well-written, well-researched nonfiction book. And this one I didn't love. And I think I always try to... So one thing you learn in, a creative writing workshop is you are there to discuss, if you're workshopping someone's writing, what works versus what doesn't work. And that's a completely different question from what you like and what you don't like. So something can happen in the story or whatever you're workshopping that you don't like. The main example of this, would be like when the main character dies and you don't want them to die because you love them, but it works for the story. So this as a book works. I didn't love it. And sometimes you just aren't going to love a book that you want to love. I felt that way about a decent number of books I read at the end of last year. And what I had to remind myself of was the award winners or the really acclaimed books. It is nice to be able to go into them being pretty confident that they're going to be coherent, but there is no guarantee that you're going to love it. So I love, as you guys know, this is the book of my heart and my love and my life. And this is a nonfiction book with a ton of research, with an author who is incredibly talented, that made a New York Times top list. And I love this book, and I didn't love Say Nothing, and there's nothing wrong with that. So if you like Ireland, recent history, dense history, maybe if you're trying to get out of like a World War II phase that you're stuck in, this is not set during World War II. It's set during the 1970s, as are the Troubles in Ireland. And it could be good for you for that. Okay, I was checking to see if I needed to add anything from my review in the back to tell you guys, and listen to this sentence. This book is like a freight elevator, not an everyday sort of ride, but it does specific heavy lifting incredibly well. That's apt. I also will say you are able to keep the characters straight. I was able to keep the characters straight. And not in the sense that I always knew exactly who everyone was, but anytime I needed to know who someone was, he would always remind me then. And that is so hard to do. So I really, really, really appreciate that. Oh, Cue the Sun is the book. We haven't talked about it yet. This book is a book I read recently. Thick nonfiction, a lot of research, where the author didn't remind you of who people were when you needed to know. And I was kind of bummed because they were all these studio heads that had a lot of power and producers and stuff. And that was one of the only connecting things between all of the different shows that she tells the story of reality TV through. And I didn't get to track with that. So, okay, I'm going to put all these books away because the Hall of Fame's falling over. Book 3. Okay. Northwoods by Daniel Mason. This is a work of fiction set in rural New England before it was called New England, and it spans about 300 years or more. And the whole book, the sort of unifying conceit is that everything takes place on this particular piece of land. So that's the jumping off point, and then it just goes all over the place from there. There is a little cabin, and then you jump 20 years and someone else comes upon this place and they add on another little room, and then you jump and then there's a family. But it's not very linear in a way that's pretty magical. So every time Mason introduces a new set of characters, or I mean every section, or you could almost say chapter, he's introducing a new set of characters for you to follow. They have different motivations. The writing style is different. Sometimes it'll be a completely different format. So it'll be letters in one section. There's a section in the latter half of the book that's a crime writer writing a article for his magazine, and he goes to visit this piece of land to try and figure out what's going on. There's some that's just omniscient narrator. There's parts where the writing is more flowery to fit the person who's telling the story, and it creates a really effective kaleidoscope is a good word. I was gonna say mishmash, but it's pretty artful, so I wanted something a little bit better than that. A really incredible kaleidoscope of different pieces of humanity and different pieces of history, and what does it mean to feel connected to the land, and how do different humans affect each other in different ways. It was really pretty special. I think I get annoyed when authors switch point of view for no reason, and I've read too many books where it's basically a form of, I don't want to say laziness, but like you quit editing too soon. So Free Water, I was really excited to read Free Water. One of the issues that I had with it was it switches narrator between not one or two, between 8 different characters. And there are a couple characters who only get one chapter. That's theirs. So to me that says you needed this character to be this narrator for the plot right here, and you should have done a little more work to figure out another way to make that happen. The opposite was the case here. What he did was so much more work than writing from just one perspective or just one writing style, and it was just gorgeous. It was just fascinating to get to read. I thought it was lovely. I recommend this. I thought it was fantastic, which is the word I use about most books, as you'll learn if you watch me talk about more than one book that I liked. I actually had one more thing I was going to say about that book. And when I got up to get the other book, I was looking for Biography of X, which I have in the other room. But Biography of X by Catherine Lacey is like an invented book within a book. And it invents all of these pieces about American government that didn't happen. So she imagines that like North and South are divided by different forms of governance, and you can't really get from one to the other. And she's basically kind of rewriting the way the world is, and then she'll randomly integrate real people from history, and that book was a mishmash. I didn't sort of latch on to that one. It felt kind of like she was just doing that for the heck of it and not in a way that I found super interesting. This book did this sort of invented history really, really well. So there's also photographs and like bits of music. Not a ton. I think that can be kind of obnoxious. I got an arc of the new Liz Gilbert book and there's poetry interspersed with the memoir, and I was like, I don't want to read that. I wasn't reading it anyway, so that was fine. But here, a little chop of a map. The part of me that loves collage and just sort of exploded, like expanded creativity, loved that. Here's a bunch of thistles. They are between chapters, so again, they're not going to be the biggest, most annoying thing in the world. And it was so cool. It was just so cool. Unlike Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaughey. I should look up how to say that. I'm not sure, so don't take my word for it. I got this book for free, then I started to read it, and then I started to quit. Then I realized it fit Lowe's reading challenge, and so then I finished it, which I don't do. I do not finish books when I know I don't want to. I don't think that's a good use of time. And this book reminded me why I don't do that. So the setting is this island, really far away. It is halfway between Australia and the South Pole. And this man, Dominic Salt, and his 3 children are the caretakers of this island. The world is dying, the planet is dying, and climate change is going to overwhelm the island. So this is set in the couple of weeks or months before they have to leave. They're gonna get picked up by the Navy or something. Sorry, getting hot. And they're gonna abandon all of the sciencey places and the seed vault. So there's zillions of seeds that were supposed to be preserved here for the future, and they're gonna have to not do it because the sea is rising like by chapter. And so that's where it opens. A man and his 3 children, they're like 17-year-old boy, a 15-year-old girl, and a 9-year-old boy or something. And this woman washes up on the shore of this incredibly remote island alive and begins to ingratiate herself in this family. And it's so weird because how is she there and why is she there? And it's trying to be a mystery, and it was just not well written. And so I felt at the end like this was like a 70%, but not in the way that you get a 70% for a school assignment. That's like kind of a decent grade. It's like a 70% if you like bake something 70%, where it's like mushy and inedible and gross. Or like, oh, we cooked the meat 70% of the way to 165 degrees. Like, that's not gonna cut it. I really thought this was such a mess. And because I thought that, I'm gonna spoil it. So if you're gonna read this book, fast forward to when this is not the one I'm talking about. I can't even do the setup of how many things make this so goofy, but at the end, this woman who washed up on the shore is there because her husband was one of the researchers, and he emailed her saying he was going crazy and she needed to find him. So she gets to the island and they say that he's dead, but then he's in the seed vault as a prisoner because he attacked the daughter, which is messed up. And then the last minute, the last day that they're trying to escape from the island, they take one too many trips to the seed vault, just one, and the 8-year-old leaves himself in there, gets trapped with the guy who is the terrible ex-husband person, gets out and is gonna go back. Puppy on the move. You can go around. Aww. the problematic man who's dangerous gets out. The 8-year-old gets stuck. The woman gets stuck with the 8-year-old, and then the dad is on top of the escape shaft, basically. And he's there with a grinder, but he really needed an anti-welder because the bolts had become way too fastened. So he was going to try and open the hatch to let this woman and his child out. But oh no, he can't. It's not supposed to be funny. George Saunders' Brain Dead Megaphone. Here's this quote. A coincidence is all right. Life is full of them. But a reader's willingness to ingest one is inversely related to how badly the writer needs one. In order to make this a really gripping, dark novel, obviously they can't all live. So the 8-year-old doesn't drown, but the woman who mysteriously didn't drown earlier does drown. But they get her body like out of the shaft like with not much time later. Sorry, let me stop ranting about things that won't sound goofy because you didn't have to live through them, through reading them. There were also, let's talk about like the actual writing. The writer would just insert herself so randomly into over-explaining things or putting her opinion in with all her characters in a way that just was needed to be edited out. The chapters were really short in the print. You can't really talk on this page, but the print was really big, and this book switched between characters all the time, and they were the time where it switches between characters, and they changed the chapter title, which to me you shouldn't have to do because it should be clear. This book was a waste of time. Let's see if I forgot any savage roasts. Oh, there was another thing that was super annoying. So you're on an island. The setup of the island, I could not picture it. And that's where you are the whole book, and it's really important. And it's not only important to just like it normally is in a book, but because the characters are in a survival type thing, so they only have certain ways they can get to certain places, and they have to pack food if they're going to walk to the far cabins. But if they take the little zippy boat, then it's going to take less time, but sometimes it would take many days to get there, and that felt super inconsistent throughout the book. And it felt weird that I could never picture the layout of, okay, where is the lighthouse compared to where is the seed bank and the lab techie area. Oh. And then she had this whole thing where the seed vault was getting flooded because the whole island was getting flooded. And this book will remind you that the planet is dying on like every other page, which is not how fiction works. Fiction must be subtle, Charlotte. Anyway, there's a tunnel that you take down to get to the seed vault. And then she would be like, oh, there was 6 inches of water in the tunnel today. It's 150 meters. I think I actually remember that number. And then there would be like 3 feet of water in the tunnel. But then you would get to the door of the seed vault and just walk in. And I don't understand how a tunnel can have 3 feet of water that you're sloshing through as you go deeper into the earth. And then you can just open a door to get into the seed vault. Would not all of the water rush in through the door? And it's not like there's a drain in the floor right there. Like, that really, really bothered me in the way that, like, I am very literal. And I think that sometimes I need to get over being too literal about things. And I don't think that is one of those times. So, skip this book. The other thing about this book is I find they are on the shelf behind me because I don't like them. So often when you read a book of fiction that's a mess, you get to the acknowledgements and the first thing is like, when I learned about the island halfway between Australia and Antarctica, I knew I had to write about it. And maybe you did, but not fiction. Like, you have to be able to pull off all of the things that make fiction worthy and interesting, and a passion for a cool island is not enough. And if you want to write a long form piece for Nat Geo, please do. I am sure I would love to read it. But this is not the book that I want to read. It is based on a real island that the author visited with her tiny baby and her husband, and I'm sure that was a really fun trip. Another book that did that just drive me crazy was Pax, which is a famous kids book about a fox. It's not in here because I don't like it, but sometimes you'll get to the end of a book and read the author's note or the acknowledgments, and it stands up and it works, and you are glad that the book exists and the author executed perfectly. And the Magnolia Wu Unfolds It All by Chanel Miller was one of those. The book is set in a laundromat in New York City owned by a Chinese family, and it is a really interesting story of these two best friends in middle school, blah, blah, blah. And then you get to the end, and Chanel is like, there were many Chinese laundromats all around the city of New York, and a lot of them had to close during COVID because people didn't need their dry cleaning done as much, and COVID coincided with a lot of anti-Asian racism and blah, blah, blah. And she tells you the super thing that completely supplements and like adds to the story you just read, but did not adds to the story, detracts from the story. So anyway, I remember that about Magnolia Wu recently and was excited. Yeah, it's hot. Okay, I've turned on a fan. It is so humid here. You can probably tell from my hair. So we'll see if that helps. I don't know if I can sit crisscross. Okay, here we go. The next book I read in June was The Practice of the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence. I've had this one on my TBR for 2 years, and as you can tell, it's like incredibly long. That's obviously why I hadn't gotten around to it, because it's just so intimidating. But so sorry. It's a book written by a monk or something, and some parts of it were super repetitive. Some parts of it were occasionally there would be something that was really wise, and I was like, great, I love that. Let me see if I can find one. I feel like to read any of these, they would come off as kind of trite, just like in a single sentence. But there were some moments in this. Okay, here. Whatever we do, even if we are reading the word or praying, we should stop for a few minutes, as often as possible, to praise God from the depths of our hearts, to enjoy Him there in secret. Since we believe that God is always with us, no matter what we may be doing, why shouldn't we stop for a while to adore Him? So I love being meditative and thoughtful about how I move through the world, and I love stopping on walks to just look at the things that are around me. So that's why I liked that sentence. But I didn't feel strongly. I'm checking to see if this is true. Yeah, I didn't feel strongly either way about this book. It didn't change my life, and I didn't think it was really crummy. Many, many, many Christian books I find completely unbearable. So that is just already incredible praise coming from me that I didn't hate it. There are a decent number of people on Goodreads who called this, and I don't think I've ever said this word out. Hagiography. That's the word. Hagiography. I don't want to look it up, so I'm not going to. So you can look up how to say that word. But anyway, they called this that because it's kind of edited by one of Brother Lawrence's like friends. I don't care. So anyway, sweet little book. Oh, I should say, my mom got me this as a party favor. She did this as a party favor for all of her friends for her 60th birthday with a really good chocolate bar and something else, and it was so fun. And so anyway, thank you for that, Rack. The next book I read, I really don't like the covers on these books. I'm not even going to show you the other two. I could get up and get them, but I'm not going to. And this is the third one in the series. This is The Portrait of a Scotsman by Evie Dunmore. Why is her name crooked? Why is this so chaotic? There's so many different types of graphic happening here. This is like real, like Oxford sketches. Anyway, I'm not gonna complain about that right now. I found this series by accident and I love it. So that's really fun. In finding it by accident, read the fourth one first. So this was actually my last one to read in the series because there's 4 in the series. The 4 books are written about 4 best friends, and they're the first women to go to Oxford. Those were called Blue Stockings, and they are making their own way in the world, and they're falling in love, and I liked a lot of things about this book, and I had a blast reading it. When I love a book enough, I'll turn off certain bits of my critiquing part of my mind, and I think that's fine. Also, though, a writer has to have a like base level of competence before I'm going to give them that and do that. I think Evie Dunmore is a really strong writer at every level. So I really love her dialogue. I think her it's like every word is worth reading. I think there's a lot of books where it's just the author doesn't know how to leave things out. This keeps coming up, and every sentence and every paragraph you can and should read in the Evie Dunmore books. Also, she has this incredibly deep understanding of like the language and the customs of that period in Britain. So sometimes she'll use these words that I have no idea what they are, but I know exactly what they mean from the context. Or she'll kind of explain something in a way that it's super it's just like something you've never heard of before because she knows the history that well. And I think that's incredible. And I had a couple of like issues with the pacing on this one. The other thing that was really cool about this book, and the other thing that really makes the series work for me, is Dunmore is always so aware of class and race and privilege in the way that that looks in people's lives. And like, I kind of can't believe that the feminism in these books isn't just like saccharine and trite and silly. And I think the books are a little silly, but I think the themes are actually pretty strong in a way that I love. So that looks different in all 4 of the books. In this one, they go to this little mining town because he's this like powerful merchant person. So he's not titled, I think is the word for that, but he's really, really wealthy. And then when they're there, she's meeting the people in the mining village, and he's really concerned about worker safety. And she's like, wow, I admire that. And then she's like, because I can tell you really like did your research into how these communities live. And he's like, I thought you figured it out. Like, I'm from here. And he had grown up like destitute in this mining community and made his own way in the world. And so she gets to meet and see like the environment that he grew up in. And then it gets into like unions and working class versus titled class. And she's like, well, why don't you just give all your money away if these people need money? And he's like, well, when you have money, you have access to types of power that like I wouldn't have access to otherwise. Or they talk about like, well, how much can we give the women a raise, and how much do we need to like preserve the pride of the men in the community? And they have like interesting conversations, and I love interesting conversations. So anyway, Hattie's such a nugget. Also, kind of the main through line of this book is her having to grow a spine, like having to learn how to like have a spine, say what she needs. And there's a couple just like really cute moments where she just like says exactly what she thinks, and then she's like, wait, the world didn't just burn down. And I love that. So she's great. Okay, Tucker told me to read this. Tucker also told me to read this, which is one of the greatest books I have read in the last 5 years. It is just a fantasy book that's just a good time, but it is so well written and so well executed, and it's perfect. So when I get recommendations from Tucker, the bar is high, which isn't quite fair because he also gave me In the Shadow of Lightning, which I didn't adore, and Babel, which I did. Anyway, Foul Days. This is another name I didn't look up how to say. I need to do that before I start. I'm so sorry. Genevieve Dimova. Potentially pronounced some other way. And I mean, the book had a plot. Stuff happened. Characters did things. But it was not well written. And I didn't really care. And it didn't work for me. And I didn't like it. I don't really want to talk about it anymore. It's like, okay, there's these two cities that are right next to each other, but there's a wall between them that's super magical, so you can't get across it. One city's like really destitute, and the other city is really prosperous. And the main character's a witch, but she gives away her shadow right at the beginning, which is super bad to do. So then she gets across the wall, and then she has to like, I don't know. Yeah, so this one wasn't it for me. I don't care. This was the really savage review that Teddy was like, that's a savage review. Reading. Genevieve, please skip ahead if you're watching. Reading this book made me appreciate talented writers, because Dimova is not one. Everything was just off. I don't recommend that book. The next book I read was Can You Hear Me Now by Suzanne Reptimali. This is an author that I met at a wedding last summer, and wildly, she was telling me about her book. I was like, I would love to read it. It's about many things, and public education is one of them. It's also about issues with people who have trouble hearing and kids who have trouble hearing in school. And so I was super into that. I was gonna order the book to the shop. I get home from this trip and the book is in my house. It is in the kitchen on the counter, and I haven't ordered it at all or anything. And anyway, Megan had brought it home in a pile from the shop, and I now have it. Thank goodness. So anyway, I finally got around to reading it, and there was so much interesting stuff in here. It's organized really interestingly. It's almost 2 books in one, which I think if you're trying to just communicate information versus like trying to have a career as an author, I think it's kind of fair to just say what you want to say in one like piece of publishing. The way that she explains it is the first like half, or it's 2 parts. The book is 2 parts. The first part is why, and the second part is how. I'm going to call her Suzanne because that's how I met her. Suzanne was a teacher in Baltimore Public Schools for, I think, 7 years. So the first chunk of the book walks through different things about public schools that aren't working. And it's from a first-person perspective, but she also pulls in research. The second half of the book is how to do something about things that aren't going well in a public school. And she uses the time from before she was a public school teacher, when she was petitioning the PTA and the elementary schools in her area to get hearing enhancement things for all the kids. She worked really hard on that before she was a teacher, so she's telling the steps that she did and then using that as the example of, okay, this is like the steps you can take if there's a problem you see that you want to work on. So, you know, using local politicians, also bringing in the PTA, also going big when you need to go big, and not bringing in private companies if it doesn't make sense for the mission, or yeah, there was just so much that was interesting in that story. the other thing that was so cool about this book was her son has an auditory processing disorder, which I sort of do/did. So also there's all these pictures of the kids and her and everything. Anyway, sorry. I'll stop flipping through and focus on what I'm saying. And one of the things I love learning from this is like, it is really, really important that students can hear their teachers, and there's a way that you can measure the acoustics in a classroom, and not acoustics in some sort of like orchestra type way, but basically from the teacher to the kids in the front row versus from the teacher to the kids in the back row, it's further. That makes perfect sense. So the kids in the back row get fewer decibels, like they cannot hear the teacher as well. And then if you measure that plus any ambient noise, you get the thing called SNR, which is sound to noise ratio. So how much can they actually hear? Like if the kid is also sitting next to a radiator and at the back of the classroom, they're gonna only get like every 5 words the teacher is saying. And then this thing that's interesting to me, because when I tested for auditory processing disorder last year, they were like, no, you're able to fill in enough words that we aren't diagnosing you with one now, but you might have had one when you were a kid, is that when you're an adult, you're better able to fill in the words that you miss because you have more context and like you know better how people talk and what they might be saying. Whereas like if you're a kid in school, the whole point is that like you're learning about things for the first time. Like you actually don't know what the weather is or the different features of fractions or something. And so you can't fill in, I'm laughing because this is so pathetic. You can't fill in like the words that you miss because you've never learned them before. And so she becomes really passionate about this sound enhancing technology that lets the teacher wear a microphone, and then there's speakers around the classroom. And basically that keeps the sound to noise ratio consistent for every child. So one thing she says is like, the kids in the front of the classroom might not be better students because they're better students and they care more and they want to sit at the front. They might be better students because they can actually hear what's happening. And so I thought that whole part was so cool and so interesting. Anyway, there was a lot of good stuff in this book, but that one, I actually haven't flipped through that book since I finished it. So all of that really stuck in my head, and that was like the thing that stuck out to me the most. Every time I put the book here, I feel like it blocks the light from my face, but right now, it's kind of nice. Next book we're reading. I'm not gonna say it's late because this is the time that I come alive, but I guess I'm just always like this. The next book that I read is The Alchemist, The Secrets of the Immortal Nicholas Flamel, which I think everyone thinks of for Harry Potter. This isn't a Harry Potter book at all. I think Nicholas Flamel is like kind of a mythic character that like existed before Harry Potter, just kind of like a name that's out there. This book was super mid, and if I'm gonna do a middle grade book, I want more than that. The pacing was kind of weird. It's twins, which is cool. That's actually not that cool. Sophie and Josh, they live in San Francisco, and he works at an antique bookshop and she works across the street at a coffee shop, and they're best friends, which I actually do love. And then all of a sudden these golems show up to the antique bookshop and start exploding everything, and Josh is involved in the fight and Sophie goes over to help, and then the guy who runs the bookshop and his wife have to run away with, so one of the wife gets kidnapped, and Sophie and Josh and Nicholas Flamel have to run away, and I just wasn't into it, and that's fine. And I'm not gonna read the next ones, and that's fine too. There's magic, there's battles, there's cat ladies, there's random integration of lots of myths from different cultures, but you know, there it is. Oh, it's by Michael Scott. I don't know if I said that. I mean, I do spill water on myself all the time, but that one was better than usual. Okay. I also got rained on at the park today, and I really love being in the rain, so that was nice until all the mosquitoes wanted to join the party too. Okay, dried off a little bit. Why is this chair so loud? Oh my goodness, one left. The last book I read was an ARC, which stands for Advanced Reader Copy. So it's a book that you get before it comes out, and they give them to booksellers and, influencers, hoping that you'll sell the book really well when it comes out, or do advanced reviews and pre-orders and that kind of thing. So I got this arc for a Jeannie Birdsell book, which Jeannie Birdsell is the author of the Pinderwick series, which are the vertical ones behind the star. You'll notice they're on the Hall of Fame shelf. You'll notice the star, which is my prized possession, is in front of them. Those books are perfect. Oh, the butterfly is folding. Okay, hope that looks fine. Don't really care if it doesn't. The Pinderwicks are some of the best books I've ever read. They're some of the best books you will ever read. They are perfect books, all 5 of them. And she ended them so well. And also I want 30 more. Anyway, this is her next newest book. She worked on the Pinderwick series for 20 years and wanted something new. It's set in Boston and Cambridge. It is about a young girl named Gwen who goes to stay with her great uncle because her homes with both of her parents are not stable. So she gets to live in a house where she has food provided for her by adults in her own bedroom and all of these incredible things for the first time in her life. There's a dog named Pumpkin who's super cute. Jeannie Birdsell loves to ride a dog. Pumpkin was great. He has a vest. He can carry things. It's awesome. She goes to the library in the town, and the children's section is super legendary, and the library has her name. So her family name is the people who 200 years ago, when they came to Boston, founded this children's section of the library. And she makes friends, and then she discovers there's a secret people who live in the children's room, and she is their leader because of lineage. And you cannot see them after the age of 6 unless you are the secret leader. And there are so many great things that happen after that, because the little girl who lives downstairs or upstairs is 6, Julia, so she can still see. Let me get the name of this. Leducan. Yeah, the Leducan. That's the name of the people. And the library is getting expanded. The children's room is changing, and Gwen is needed to help the tribe of Leducan find a new home. And it goes from there. And there's the integration of a really cool Boston landmark that I've been to, so that was fun. There's a great adventure scene at the end, like in the middle of a thunderstorm. And there's a cool, like, older, I guess she's an older cousin, but kind of like an older sister type figure who comes in. And yeah, solid, good time. One of my complaints is the names were all hard to pronounce and hard to read. And I would guess, because of how Jeannie Birdsell is, that these are probably linguistically correct. Like, I think she actually went to wherever in the UK that the peoples immigrated here from, and I would guess these names are consistent with the way that words work. But it was hard to read, and the pronunciation guide is at the end, so I could have used that earlier. And also I don't like chunky words that are made up, because why could you not make a non-chunky made up word? Which the most problematic, offensive version of that's not fair negativeness, but Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros was the most annoying one for that. And I also, part of that's me, because I don't know how to read the letter X, so I really did not know how to pronounce Xaden's name. But there are so many other names in that are so unnecessarily convoluted, and I kind of felt that way reading this one a little bit. This one didn't, like, hit. And I tried to think, is that just because it hasn't gotten to lodge itself in my heart yet, like the Pinderwicks? Maybe, but I don't think so. It has a lot of heart. But I didn't love it. But I will always be grateful for more things written by my favorite authors. And I don't think it's going to be a series, which is good, because maybe she'll go in another direction and write something else absolutely incredible. I also did see a mom who said, I read The Penricks to my kids and they loved it, but I think they'll like this even more because there's magic in it, and that's great. I hope the kids do like it with the magic. So, y'all, my throat is dry. Those are the books that I read in June. I hope it wasn't annoying that I held this the whole time. Bye.